welcome back. In this video, we're going to look at the Electronic Transactions Act and applying it to your assignment. So turning first to the assignment itself, just to highlight the key points. You're going to use an example of your business, pick a customer or a supplier, then look at how the existing rules for the formation of contract would apply, and then identify how the Electronic Transactions Act changes those basic rules on formation of contracts. And you may build this into your contract policy. The second part is a practical issue of email addresses of staff dealing with clients, in particular if they leave, and of course if a contract is formed electronically, where is it formed and who is aware of it. So we'll turn to that towards the end. So let's start with a simple example to illustrate some of the issues that arise with this. So here we have a couple of people who are looking at contracting. So this chap lives in Bolivia, this lady lives in Iceland, and they intend to engage in business. Now, for our purposes here, we're going to assume that they are communicating by phone as well. Now, this will exclude the postal rule of acceptance, which would modify what's happening with this example. So let's start with this chap. He wants to make an offer. An offer has no legal effect until it's communicated, so the offer becomes a legal offer when it reaches her in Iceland. She then has to accept it for there to be a contract, but acceptance has no legal effect until it reaches the person it's made to. So on those facts, the contract has now been formed in Bolivia. Now, just as an aside, that postal rule, if it did apply, acceptance would be occurring the moment she posted it. But if we have any other forms of communication involved, that rule doesn't apply. So almost invariably in business, the acceptance will occur when it reaches the other person. So what are the implications of this? Well, firstly, the law would be the law of Bolivia because that's where the contract's formed. And if that's a normal place of residence and they intend it to be in Bolivia, that's fine. If they're aware of these rules, they can put a clause in the contract saying whose law applies. But in the absence of that clause, it will be Bolivian law on this example. Now let's complicate this just a wee bit with some other possibilities. So we'll add some countries, for example. So these people might conduct business in several different places. So he likes to go to Japan. She's in Italy, Australia, and that's Kenya. So what would happen in this example if this person here was in Kenya and this person was in Japan at the time of the offer and acceptance? Well, we'd simply apply the same rules. Offer goes there, the acceptance is made and comes back here. And so applying that rule, the contract would now be Kenyan law and it would apply to it, which clearly, since they normally reside in Bolivia and Iceland, may not in fact suit them. Now we could put in countries all over the place, and you can quickly see that with people traveling and communicating, the old rules of contract would create significant problems because the people would not be in their place of residence when contracts formed. The law relating to the contract would be the law of some other country, and this would be quite difficult to deal with. So let's turn to the Electronic Transactions Act and just start looking at how this impacts these basic rules because it changes them significantly. Now, I've brought up a website which is consumer protection from the Ministry of Business and Innovation's website, and they have an electronics reference, and I'll put the link to this with the video on Canvas. And it has a great summary here. So we're talking about Electronic Transactions Act. Okay, so what can we say about here? You've got a number of definitions which will help you a lot in working through here. What is an electronic transaction? And you can see it's any electronic means, electrical, digital, optical, electromagnetic, etc. So it certainly covers emails and our normal communications. It's not telephone, however. Although the use of VoIP systems over the internet is not so clear and would likely be an electronic transaction. Okay, so if we move down the page, the key things which we're looking at today are to do with contract formation. So this is pertinent to it. When an electronic is sent, transaction is sent and received. So the offer is sent, but it's not an offer till it's received, and the acceptance is not an acceptance until it's also received. So you can see here the statement's quite clear. You send it at the time it enters an information system outside your control. So that, as it's saying, is usually when you hit send and an email enters the receiver's server. That could be anywhere from you sending it through Gmail to Hotmail. So when you send it off your desktop, it goes to your internet service provider, whoever that might be, Orcon, Spark, whoever, and it goes then to the Gmail service. It then transfers to the Yahoo service and goes to the ISP of the recipient, and they may download it. Now, what's clear from this is that you do not form a contract when it is received by that person on their computer. It's when it enters the information system. So you send it the moment you hit enter in effect, because it's gone to the other outside of your control, to your information system. Okay. Now the second thing here is, when is an electronic sent from? So this is when it's sent. The offer and acceptance are sent the moment you effectively hit send, and it goes outside of your computer. And where is it sent from? Now if we look down here, it's taken to be sent from the usual place of business, or if no place of business, from the sender's home. And that gets around the issues in that previous diagram with where the people are. So when is a contract formed? This is making the points, as I made earlier, that it's where it's not agreed by both parties or excluded by law. And we'll just leave that to one side at the moment. So we can put in our contract policy, which means we'd have to put it in our contract communications, as to where it's formed and when it's formed. Now the basic rule, as we've already said, is a contract's formed, acceptance not by electronic means takes place when communicated to the other party. And above, communicated is when you've actually hit send and it's reached the other person's server. Other points worth looking at here: legal requirements. A number of contracts must be in writing, so the sale and purchase of property, a lot of financing arrangements under the Consumer Credit Finance Act must be in writing, and this act is making it clear that electronic transactions are considered to be in writing and sufficient for those transactions. Okay, so the site provides us with a great summary, but let's also turn to the Act itself, which is our primary source of law, and in the interpretation section you can find all the various interpretations you need as to what these things are. You'll notice also it has electronic signatures if you intend to attach those to your communications. So here we have the actual rules that were referred to in that previous issue: time of dispatch, time of receipt. So an electronic communication is received in case of addressee, the person it's sent to, who has designated an information system. So if you give a person your email address, you are designating an information system, and you've received it when it enters that information system. So that would be, if I use Gmail, my Gmail account, not my computer. Second key point was the place of receipt, and as in the summary on the MBIE site, the addressee's place of business or closest relationship with the transaction. So if we do business in multiple places around the world and the transaction relates to something in New Zealand, it will be taken as New Zealand. And if you don't have a place of business, your ordinary place of residence. So if we go back to our friends here, we've decided the contract was formed here because acceptance reached this person in Bolivia, and if he's in Kenya doing the work and she's in Australia doing the work, nothing is going to change. The contract would still be formed in Bolivia on our previous arrangements because that's his normal place of residence. It doesn't matter where he actually is. Where this changes quite significantly is in the time of contracting. So let's just look at the place and time of acceptance a little bit more. So in our previous example, offer goes there, acceptance goes there, and we have a contract under the old rules. Now with this electronic situation, things change quite dramatically. So we're assuming here that our two parties are using electronic transactions. So this person sends the offer to Gmail address, goes to Yahoo, and it goes back to that person. And then she's going to respond by sending her email through Yahoo, which goes through the servers of Gmail and ends back at this person. So under those arrangements, this offer, which would have had to reach her, now simply has to reach here and then go to a designated address given by the recipient. Equally, the acceptance only has to reach the servers of the person it's intended to reach. So those servers could be basically anywhere in the world. So for New Zealand, for example, Gmail servers are in Australia. But under our rules, we know exactly what the law is. The contract has been formed the moment it reaches the server outside her control, which is the designated address of the recipient. So the contract is formed here, regardless of where he's got it. That's his place of business, his usual residence, so he's received it there. So the contract is still formed in Bolivia under Bolivian law, but the time of acceptance is when it reaches Gmail, which in reality is the moment you hit send. So if you think these issues through in terms of your contracting, it makes the issues of travel much more simple. It makes identification of location of the contract and its law quite simple. But it does introduce an issue that you need to be very clear about the addresses you use for your communications and that you have control over those email addresses. And this brings in our second question of this assignment. How will you deal with email addresses of staff dealing with clients or suppliers? So if you think about the situation, what would happen if this person was an employee and he quit, or you fired him and he was gone? Now, this person has received the offer because it's got through to the Yahoo servers, and she sent back an accept and it's got to the Gmail servers. But in this particular case, the person who would access those Gmails, this chap, is now gone. But under our law, the contract is formed. And if he was working for your business, he would have formed that contract on your behalf. And you would have a contract, and you may not know it exists, and you may have difficulty accessing the email. So put some thought into how you might deal with that issue. And to finish off today, here's a warthog digging for something or other.